My name is Alan C. Paul, and you are here for our Creative Checkup Live, which is what we do every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And we help you in some specific area to help you to build a creative life from the inside out, a better creative life, a transformed creative life from the inside out by applying timeless spiritual principles to a temporary creative problem that you're facing. And so today we're talking about the problem of being, it sounds so weird to say ashamed of your faith, because I know if I'm talking to you right now, if you're watching me, you're not a person who is ashamed of your faith. Most likely you are very proud and very dedicated to being a Christian, to being a follower of Jesus, to knowing that your creative life is all encompassed because God gave you this gift. However, now there's a difference between being proud and being happy and being unashamed of your faith in terms of who you are. And then there is the practical way of actually how to integrate that and walk in your creative faith, into your creative calling, and being okay with that, even in front of people, and how that actually looks. I guess the best way I can say this is what happens when you're playing in a performance or on a stage, or you're talking to someone and faith does not come up. Faith is not a part of that particular conversation. And something leads to that. And you might say, something to the regards of your belief. And they're like, oh, I didn't even know you were a Christian or something. And it stabs you to your heart because you feel like you haven't been as open about your faith, because maybe the professional area just didn't allow for it. It just didn't seem like it, there wasn't an opportunity for you to share. You weren't actually trying to, evangelize at that moment, which is perfectly fine, by the way. Let me start by saying that this is not a call to where every time you show up on a stage, every time that you are on somebody's, performance, or in a position of influence, or even sharing with like your friends or your peers, this doesn't mean every time that people talk to you that you have to start the conversation with, do you know Jesus? As a matter of fact, that's kind of what we mostly know is the opposite effect when you are too heavy-handed with the only reason that you're here on a particular job, or as a participant in this particular thing, is, oh, I'm just here to spread the good news, and whatever happens, the only goal I have is to make sure that everybody on this set, in this band, gets saved. That's clearly not the mandate that we have. Now, I'm going to definitely allude, although I haven't had a chance to read it yet, to a new book out by my an amazing mentor, friend, business associate, and author, Jordan Rayner. We've been following him for years. He just wrote a book called The Sacredness of Secular Work. And while I haven't had a chance to read it yet, this is really kind of tied into what he shares in that our secular work, and God and Gigs is perfectly aligned with this. Our secular work is a sacred act. Our secular work, the way we perform and create outside of the church, is literally just as important as what people do inside the church, the ministry. Because Colossians says, whatever we do to the glory of God. And in my book, God and Gigs, we talk a lot about why that's not a oxymoron, to give glory to God while doing things in a position or a place that doesn't seem like it gives glory to God. We can talk about Joseph showing up in the palace and being in Potiphar's house and serving the Egyptians, and same thing with Moses and Daniel in Babylon. These were people who were serving and literally helping things to run in a place that was absolutely anti-God, and yet they were never chastised and said you shouldn't even be working there. They were positioned there. And the thing I want to say closely to those of you who are now thinking about this, like, okay, how do I actually show up? And again, a couple of people who have spoken to me, some amazing friends, have opened up about this, and it's becoming more and more clear to me that it's something we need to address. We need to address, how do we really show up? Like, what's the, it's going to sound crazy, what's the right amount of Christianity to put into this? What's the right amount of discussion? What's the right amount of God I should bring into this, in terms of especially a performance situation, a studio situation, a creative situation where it's not really part of the conversation at the time? And you're wondering, am I supposed to insert it? Am I supposed to be really like open about it and just say, hey, by the way, I'm a Christian? Or are you supposed to wait till the opportune time, wait till God kind of opens the door? Is there something you bring up when something comes up in terms of like something that might be counter to your faith? Do you bring that up, or do you just bring it up in terms of, hey, I don't feel comfortable with this? Or do you bring up why you're not comfortable? So there's so many practical areas where this does kind of impact the way you think about what do you do as a believer. Well, where do I draw, if there was a line to draw, where do I draw this line? So here's the first thing I would suggest, and this is coming from personal experience as well as from all the interviews we've done on the God and Geek show, and a lot of experts and people who have walked this line. The first thing to realize is that before there was ever a conversion, there's always a conversation. And before there's a conversation with somebody, usually there's some kind of interaction or kind of transaction that has nothing to do with God, nothing to do with, you and who you stand as a believer. It's more about the person and serving them well. So almost every single time in these creative environments, what you first have to realize is your goal is not immediately to bring up Jesus. It's not immediately to become like this preacher that suddenly like opens up the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit comes in, opens up the Bible, and all of a sudden they just like feel angels descending around you. That's not the way it usually happens. What usually happens is you represent God well in the way that you serve, in the way that you perform, in the way that you act, in the way that you sing. Your presentation becomes the number one thing. We talk about this in my book. At the end of the chapter, it talks about evangelizing through your gift, the last chapter. And so many times your evangelism has nothing to do with actually speaking. Now, that does not mean that we don't sometimes actually share words. That doesn't mean we don't oftentimes need to say specifically what we want people to hear. But we don't always lead with that. As a matter of fact, like I just mentioned, most times, especially in creative areas where there's no component that it has anything to do with that, the way you really represent God is by being the best person on the job, by being the best person, the best creative, the most open thinker, the one that has the best, rapport with everyone. That speaks volumes. Before you open your mouth and even by you realize that you're a Christian, the first thing you do as a creative is you really show people who you are and who you represent through your actions. And so it's so powerful to know that, no, you don't have to be a preacher and have every single Bible verse memorized. No, you don't have to, suddenly come up with all of these like flowery comments about how God is using you at that point. Because as a matter of fact, 9 times out of 10, that's what people don't understand. And they're not interested in that. They're interested in being served and being seen as who they are. And the second point, which is equally as important, doing your job well, doing what you've been called to do, whether it's leading or whether it's being in that choir or being the soloist, and really realizing that that excellence is what draws people to you first so that there can be a conversation. So I want to free anybody, especially all of you, my friends who work outside of church, and you may have a ministry position, but then you're thinking, okay, everything else I do on my job or my performances or whatever, like this is not, a godly environment. And I have to like kind of toe the line, and you're being super careful about what you say and how you say it. I want to release you from some pressure. Not that you shouldn't always work circumspectly, but I don't want you to feel like every single thing you say or do is suddenly going to be a judgment on your salvation or whether or not you can speak to people. Most likely, the way you're conducting yourself is drawing people before you ever have the conversation and before they ever realize that, yeah, he goes to church, he's a Christian, she's a Christian. The way you conduct yourself is already doing the work for you. So you don't have to be so concerned about the last thing you said or the how do you speak this and how do you say this. It's so important that you give yourself the grace to realize that as long as you are growing in God, as long as you are growing in your faith, when you show up, you're bringing that same growth, that same light with you. And the scripture that comes to mind is where Paul says that we have this treasure in earthen vessels so that people may realize that the gift is not of us. It's in us, but not of us. It's not from us. And so as creators, we oftentimes are in places where we show up and it seems like, oh my gosh, like they've either, been so gifted or so dedicated or so talented or whatever. And our job is not necessarily to say, okay, that's Jesus right there. Not at the very moment. Now, obviously, you can watch every single Super Bowl commercial, every single thing where someone comes up and thanks God after they receive the award. Yes, there's a place for that. But I believe that the first place we actually help people by showing up and not being ashamed is by being honestly and truthfully excellent and not immediately expecting people to suddenly um, be interested in who we are before we give and we serve and we prove ourselves as people who are loving, caring, who are kind, who are considerate, who are excellent, who are diligent. Those qualities as a creative are the things that are going to draw people most. That is the first step. And then after that, you can talk about that interaction that turns into a conversation, that turns into a conversation about your faith, about who you are. And so the second thing I want to kind of touch on quickly is, what does it mean to be a Christian creative when it comes down to, well, am I a Christian first and a creative second? Am I creative here, this position? And then I say I'm a Christian, so that kind of like colors everything I do. Like, where's the balance? Well, again, I want to make sure I clear this up for you. And if you're watching, by the way, live, let me know in the comments, have you ever dealt with this? Have you ever had a situation where you felt kind of like, how do I show up here? Do I even talk about church? If I don't talk about church, is it bad? If I don't mention I'm a Christian, is it bad? If I am in a position where like this is a definite, like very weird place for me to perform or to sing or to play or to dance, but I'm doing my job, is it like, so do I have some kind of moral obligation to say something like, this is not the way I really do things? This is not, this is counter my beliefs. Do I have to walk off stages? All of these things, again, I'm not talking to people who would judge you for it. I'm talking to you as you deal with it. Because one thing I've always been very clear of in my book and everything I share, this is not for the people who don't understand. Everything we share in these comments is for people who are already dealing with it. So we're not talking to people who are, judgmental, who think you shouldn't ever be on a stage, that you should never be doing something that's not secular, not sacred. That's not for them. This is for you who are thinking about this. So when it comes to that, where do we, again, a weird way to say it, draw the line? Where I say, I would say, honestly, you got to look back to people like Paul. Paul, who was brought up as a Jew, who knew all the codes, who knew everything about, the secular culture, and he knew everything about the Jewish culture. And yet here he is now, the leader of a church. And so many times you see Paul, although he probably didn't want to, basically adopt the customs up to the point that it would not contradict the Bible, would not contradict his faith. He adopted the customs that would help people read and understand who he was and be relatable. So when it comes to Jewish customs, he would go ahead and do the things that the Jews, just to make sure they were not, offended by him. And then he talks the whole thing about meat, and, we can go into the Bible deep in terms of that. I don't want to go that deep. All I'm saying is that Paul says very clearly that I will become all things to all people that I might win some. So where does that relate to you as a creative? Well, what it means is you have to think about how you can be that kind of person that someone would want to continue a conversation. How can you meet them where they are without compromising who you are? So in the case of, let's say, an after party, maybe you're not comfortable at after parties. Maybe you feel like that's too much. I don't want to be in that environment. But can you create an environment where somebody who goes to the after parties can then come to your room, can come to chill out with you later and be in a more, controlled environment and still have conversations? Can you be that personable person that says, hey, I won't show up here, but I would love to meet you here? hey, I'm not going to be there, but I would love to be there. How can you make an environment that creates that space and that place where you can have conversations about real stuff? 90% of the conversations I've ever had about faith on my jobs and my gigs have been backstage, have been after the gig, have been just chopping it up and talking. And I get to share what's really going on in my life. And, when someone's doing something that I know, it's like, I wish I could help you. But here's how the best way I can help you is just tell you, man, like you got to get into a church. You got to find a pastor that can help you with this, because I can't even help you. But if you are willing to talk to me about it, I'm going to talk to you for real. But I'm not going to be, preachy. I'm just going to tell you what really happens. I love this. Let me see here. And by the way, hope that this comes out well on this. I've never tried the comments here. Yeah, it pops up. Oh, that's nice. I like that. Okay, so pick and choose. Most of my friends have always been atheists and agnostics, same as coworkers, and I've always been comfortable wearing my faith on my sleeve. The key is to be, okay, this is big. I love this line. The key is to be kind, real about your flaws, and non-judgmental. Man, I'm just going to leave that up there because that couldn't be said any better. Kind, real about your flaws, and non-judgmental. And then people are so honestly okay with you because you're not trying. They can tell that you're not, you know what it is? It's very often when you seemingly pin your identity and you're like, if they feel like it's a win-lose, people draw away because they feel like if they don't follow you and don't listen to what you have to say and you become very judgmental or very insecure, that security that we have in our faith is very attractive. And when you really are honest and say, hey, is this maybe for you right now? I don't know. All I know, this is just what works for me. And as a creative, I have a huge freedom to do what God has blessed me to do, and I enjoy it. Thank you so much, Simony. I love the fact that you're here hanging out with us. Um, and again, tell me what you think about this. We got to get off at 1:30 because I have to get ready for a performance tonight. So, but yeah, I really wanted to touch on this because this has come up over and over. I saw a post by Chrisette Michelle, and I think she's got a new podcast out, and she was basically just like, talking about the same thing. That's why I saw it over and over. I was like, okay, we got to talk about this. She basically was saying, like, is it okay that people even, realize that I'm saved and I'm like not, she went through so much stuff in the social media world. And she kind of like is commenting on that, like, is this even okay anymore for me to like say, hey, I'm saved, because people are going to judge me based on the fact that I haven't either been leading with it or now I'm more open about it. And then people say, well, why didn't you say something before? Or now you're just using it as a crutch. So there's so much noise around this, right? So I just want to help those of us in the circle, in our community, to do exactly what we just shared. You just said it up there. Key to be kind, real about your flaws, and non-judgmental. And then to lead with excellence in terms of your work. To lead in terms of, I'm not trying to convince you by words or by being eloquent. And the Bible even talks about that. It's just not of eloquence and not words, but it's the power of God that really compels people, and the Spirit that draws them. So it is not to say you don't have a responsibility, that we don't have a responsibility. It's to say that it is not solely our responsibility, and it's definitely not solely our words or our perfect behavior that lets us show up in these stages, lets us show up in performances and in places where people are like, wow, like you just, killed that role. And it was not an easy role. And it was a lot of stuff. Simony, I love this. I feel like this should have gone a lot longer. Now I realize I wish I could have done it longer. We'll have to do a part 2. Currently navigating this. So far, so good. Still trying to be respectful without compromising. Beautiful. This is what I'm talking about. Like, it's a never ending battle. I show up on so many gigs where it's like, I know no one in there. I mean, some people catch it. It's funny. People will catch it. They'll hear you like, oh my gosh, like you go to church, or they'll ask me to play a song and I'll play it right away. And they're like, oh, okay, no, you must be a church guy, because no one would know that song, such and such. And so that happens a lot where you're like, each week, each day you show up, you're like, okay, this very crazy creative world that I'm in has all kinds of different people in it. And yet I'm called to be a light. So how am I going to be a light in this specific area? Because everybody has to do this, right? Every Christian has to do this. But creators, we have to do this in a very unique way. The whole reason behind God and Gigs is there's a unique way that creatives have to express their faith, and at the same time be totally open about, hey, sometimes I need to perform or create or do things that have nothing to do with my faith or might even be hostile to it. But how do I navigate that? And again, that's why I'm so glad we can talk about this. Um, when people feel good about themselves around you, you'd be surprised how often they're the ones that bring up your faith. Yes, man, we're so on the same wavelength. I'm so glad you guys showed up live so that I can, and then everybody that's watching on replay, feel free to comment. This is our first time doing YouTube and Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm going to post this in Facebook later because I can only do the 3 places right now via StreamYard. By the way, I shameless plug. I am very, very much enjoying StreamYard. As you can see, I'm doing these different things now. So if you're interested in trying out StreamYard, I think we have a link for that. I believe it's under Alan C. Paul. Give me 1 second. You're going to see me go. Wait, you know what? No, I never have my phone when I need it. So stressing me out. Anyway, I'll put a link in the comments. How's that? Because I don't remember if I have a code for StreamYard. I think I do. But this is something that's really effective for you guys to share if you want to share on Instagram, on YouTube, and so on. So that's where this comes from. This comes from, again, when I see it pop up 3 or 4 times with 3 or 4 different people that I respect. Like I said, the book by Jordan Rayner. I'll put a link to that as well in the comments. So if you're watching later, I'll also send this to you via the newsletter, the God and Gigs newsletter. I'll send that to you so you can check that out. That book just came out, The Sacredness of Secular Work. The other resource that, again, I would highly recommend beyond, my book is, let me see, there's actually a couple of them that, well, The Heart of the Artist is kind of like more toward church. So to be honest with you, this is where it's like, honestly, my book is one of the few books that talks about this. So I want to make sure that I give you some resources to look at, and we could possibly also do some more podcasts on this. So I would love to talk about this more because I know we're going to come up on it and we're going to have to leave. And again, the first couple of minutes was kind of mixed up because my sound was off. So in totality, this little short creative checkup. And if you have any other comments, guys, please share them. I love Simony coming in. Oh, by the way, happy birthday, Simony. I have to tell everybody happy birthday. Our God and Gigs Ambassador 360. If you want to hang out with her and God and Gigs 360, you got to go check out godandgigs.com/gold. godandgigs.com/gold. Check that out because you would love to see what's going on there. You're going to enjoy that. Matter of fact, let me quickly see if I can pop that up real quick. There we go. Yeah. So check that out. That is where we're hanging out as a mastermind, as a community. And Simony has been so amazing as the administrator/ambassador for the godandgigs.com/gold program, the Gold 360 program. So definitely check her out. Happy birthday to you, my friend. I want to make sure we got that in there. All right. So again, in totality, to kind of close this out, because again, this is a short one. We want to show up first, to be not ashamed of our faith as creators, show up with excellence, lead by serving, serve first by doing the most excellent work you can, by being that person that is all the things that God has called us to be in the world, to be people that are salt and light and people who are diligent and dedicated and trustworthy. Because if you don't get that part right, there's no way anybody's going to trust you to your heavenly knowledge if they can't trust your earthly knowledge, if they can't trust the way you show up, if they can't trust your word, if they can't trust your work ethic, if they can't trust those things, they're not going to trust you when you say things that are spiritual because they're just not going to line up. So the first thing for all of us creators is just do good work. And I know this is a misattributed quote, but I believe people usually attribute it to Martin Luther. And it says that, if you want to, bring somebody to Christ and you're a shoemaker, the first thing to do is not to put crosses on all your shoes, is to make excellent shoes. And it's the same thing for all creatives, all of us, singing, dancing, writing, drawing, acting. do it excellently. Make people really believe and know that you are someone that cares about the details, that cares about doing work right, that even is willing to stretch a little bit and do things that are out of your comfort zone and bend a little bit. Not bend your faith, but I've said this many times. The Bible is really an X-rated book. If you really look at it, like there's some crazy, crazy stuff that happens in the Bible that would absolutely be X-rated if it were just played out. And so for us to say, oh, we can only play good roles, or we can only sing, songs that have Jesus in them, when life is literally in all of these messy areas, and we need to talk about them as creatives. And Christians will be the most qualified to play the most despicable roles because we know how bad things can get. So that is, oh my gosh, you guys are gonna make it so hard to step away. I said it was going to be a 30-minute one because I have to get ready for this gig tonight. Thank you so much, Simone. Love having you here. Thank you for jumping in. Yes, it's one of our friends from, you're also in God Against 360. I want to say your name right. I don't want to say because I don't want to get it wrong. But thank you so much for joining. It's so good to have you in God Against 360 as well. Looking forward to part 2. I am as well. I just wish I had more time today. I am committing to my friend LaShonda. If you haven't checked out LaShonda, we just did a workshop on marketing and podcasting and branding and being consistent with your content. It was hugely amazing. Go check out Bootstrap Biz Advice, Bootstrap Biz with a Z Advice, Bootstrap Biz Advice, and go find her YouTube that we did together. She put me on the hot seat. Man, she was good. This is why I'm showing up, because LaShonda has challenged me to show up. So even though I have an event like coming up in the next, I got to leave in the next 20 minutes, I still came. I'm still going to keep showing up. I'm going to be in my workout clothes, whatever. I'm going to show up because I've committed to this, and I want to make sure that we're helping our community to grow. Dependable saying, people are rare commodities. Yes. Oh my gosh. You are like reading my mind. That's exactly it. That is exactly it. We are rare unicorns when we show up on time and we know what we're talking about, and we're not trying to cause drama. We stick out like sore thumbs. Absolutely 100% correct. I love that phrase right there. Thank you for sharing that. It's so true. Let me see if I can get down here. I can't see this last little piece. Yes, to be one. Exactly. B1. Okay, guys, I do have to leave on time. This was great. Again, hopefully you liked my little format here. This was designed for phones, and I'm on Instagram as well. Looks like everybody that was joining us was on YouTube, though. But we'll see what happens on the replay if people enjoy this on Instagram as well, and just experimenting a little bit. But thank you for hanging in with me. Thank you for being willing to stick in the first couple of minutes that were silent and being able to have this conversation. We definitely need to do a part 2 with this. So once again, if you are interested in being a part of our mastermind that absolutely goes deep into all these issues, how to be strong in your faith, but not only that, to be strong in your finances, in your marketing, everything, go to godandgigs.com/gold 14-day free trial to be a part of that as well. Okay. And I will definitely, again, check the comments. I'm going to put a link to Jordan's book, The Sacredness of Secular Work. Highly recommended. And we're basically talking about what he talks about. We've had Jordan on our podcast at least twice. Probably should have him on a third time to talk about this book, The Sacredness of Secular Work. No affiliate, thing for that. It's just, I recommend it 100%. To anybody that wants to know how to navigate being a secular / artist, creative, entrepreneur, whatever, but knowing that your work has eternal significance in the kingdom. All right, you guys, thanks so much. God bless you. Thanks so much for joining in. I'll be back here same time, 1:00. Hold me to it. 1:00 on our Creative Checkup Lives. God bless everybody. Take care.